Grand Marshal Drakis stood at the bridge of the Nexus Eternal, his crystalline carapace reflecting the pale blue light of Earth's atmosphere. The massive warship hung in high orbit, leading a fleet of over 300 vessels. His secondary hearts pulsed with anticipation as he studied the primitive defenses of the human homeworld below. Pathetic, he chittered, mandibles clicking in amusement. Their orbital stations don't even have proper shield generators. He turned to his senior tactical officer, Vezare, whose translucent skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns of agreement. Show me their military response. The holographic display flickered to life, showing scattered formations of human fighters and capital ships rising to meet them. Their movements seemed erratic, uncoordinated. Several vessels nearly collided during basic maneuvers. Are they actually this incompetent? Vezare wondered aloud, her crystalline fingers dancing across the control interface. Our initial intelligence suggested they at least understood basic space combat. Drakis let out a rasping laugh. Perhaps we overestimated them. The Nektari Empire has conquered 1,000 worlds, and none have disappointed me quite like this. He straightened his towering frame, the neural interfaces along his spine humming with power. Begin the invasion. I want boots on the ground within the hour. The first wave of drop ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. Inside each vessel, Nektari warriors checked their biomechanical armor, weapons primed. They had expected resistance, perhaps even a challenge. Instead, they watched in bewilderment as human defense systems activated seemingly at random. Ground-based missile batteries fired wildly into empty sky. Anti-aircraft guns tracked phantom targets. Defense shields flickered to life over empty fields while leaving critical infrastructure exposed. It was as if the humans had forgotten everything they knew about warfare. Colonel Marina Rodriguez watched the Nektari invasion force from her underground command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. Her dark eyes reflected the tactical displays as reports flooded in from around the globe. To anyone monitoring their communications, the human forces appeared to be in complete disarray. Status report, she commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding on the screens. Lieutenant Park's fingers flew across his console. Operation Fool's Gold is proceeding exactly as planned, Colonel. The Nektari are taking the bait. Their forces are advancing exactly as predicted, following the paths of least resistance we've created. Marina allowed herself a small smile. The Nektari, like so many advanced species, had a critical weakness: pride. Their technological superiority had bred an unshakable arrogance. They saw humans as primitive, barely worth the effort of conquest. And now that arrogance would be their undoing. Continue with Phase 1, she ordered. Maintain the appearance of incompetence. Let them think they're witnessing the collapse of human military capability. Across the globe, human forces executed their roles with precision, though to outside observers it looked like pure chaos. Tanks reversed into ditches. Aircraft squadrons scattered in apparent panic. Communications appeared to break down at crucial moments. The Nektari advance was swift and confident. Their massive walkers strode through cities unopposed, as human forces seemed to trip over themselves trying to mount any kind of defense. Grand Marshal Drakis watched with growing disdain as his forces secured objective after objective. This isn't even warfare, he complained to Vezare as they prepared to join the ground assault. This is pest control. These humans are barely worthy of becoming our slaves. Deep underground, Marina received confirmation that the Nektari command ship had entered the atmosphere. Everything was proceeding according to plan. She opened a secure channel to her global command network. All units, continue as briefed. Remember, we only get one shot at this. Make them believe in their superiority. Make them believe in our weakness. The greater their confidence, the harder they'll fall. As the first part of humanity's greatest deception unfolded, no one on the Nektari side questioned why their victory seemed too easy. No one wondered why human forces consistently fell back in ways that drew the alien armies deeper into carefully prepared kill zones. And no one noticed the subtle patterns in the apparent chaos, the hidden purpose behind each seemingly random failure. The trap was set. The Nektari were committed. And humanity's true strength remained hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the Nektari invasion force pushed deeper into human territory, their confidence grew with each passing hour. Ground Commander Rylix, leading the vanguard of their eastern assault force, watched with barely concealed contempt as another human defensive position crumbled before them. "Look at how they scatter," he growled to his subordinates, his armored frame casting long shadows in the morning light. "Their weapons can't even penetrate our basic shields. It's as if they've forgotten everything they know about combat." The humans had retreated from New Delhi, leaving behind a maze of destroyed infrastructure and failed defensive measures. Mines detonated harmlessly in empty zones. Automated turrets fired at shadows. Every human counterattack seemed to fall apart before it began. In a hardened bunker beneath the Antarctic ice, Colonel Marina Rodriguez studied the tactical displays with intense focus. Lieutenant Park's latest report brought a subtle smile to her face. "The Nektari have taken the bait completely, Colonel," he reported. "Their forces are advancing along all the predicted vectors. They're so convinced of our incompetence that they've abandoned basic security protocols." Marina nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. "And the quantum tracking markers?" "Successfully attached to 87% of their ground forces. Every time they walk through our failed defensive positions, they're picking up more of the nanoscale trackers. They think it's just debris from our collapsing infrastructure." The colonel's plan had been months in the making. Humanity had known the Nektari were coming, had studied their previous conquests, and had identified their greatest weakness, their absolute conviction in their own superiority. "Begin Phase 2, Marina commanded. Let's give them something new to laugh about." Across the globe, human forces executed their next set of carefully choreographed blunders. In Moscow, an entire armored division appeared to suffer a communications breakdown, their vehicles moving in random directions before retreating in disarray. The Nektari pursued, never questioning why the humans consistently fell back toward heavily urbanized areas. Grand Marshal Drakis, now directing operations from a forward command post, received the reports with growing amusement. "These humans," he chittered to Vezare, "they build these magnificent cities, yet they can't even defend them properly. It's almost tragic." Vezare's bioluminescent patterns flickered with agreement, but something was nagging at her consciousness. "Marshal, don't you find it strange that their retreat patterns are so consistent?" "Consistent?" Drakis turned his crystalline gaze toward her. "They're running like trapped animals. There's no pattern to fear." But Vezare wasn't convinced. She pulled up a holographic display of human troop movements over the past 12 hours. In every major engagement, they fall back to urban centers. Their defensive failures, while complete, always seem to. "Seem to what, Officer Vezare?" Drakis' tone carried a warning edge. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing, Marshal. You're right, of course. They're simply inferior." Meanwhile, in cities across the planet, human civilians had vanished underground into vast shelter networks, leaving behind empty streets and buildings. The Nektari interpreted this as another sign of human cowardice, never suspecting that each city was being transformed into an elaborate trap. Marina received confirmation that the civilian evacuation was complete. "Status of the EMP hardening?" she asked. "All critical systems are shielded and ready," Lieutenant Park confirmed. "The Nektari still haven't detected the modifications we've made to the urban power grids. They're too busy laughing at our failing infrastructure." The colonel allowed herself a moment to appreciate the irony. The aliens' advanced technology, their biomechanical augmentations, and their neural interfaces were all about to become their greatest vulnerabilities. But timing would be crucial. How long until their forces are fully committed to the urban centers? At current advance rates, approximately 6 hours. They're getting sloppy, Colonel. Their formations are loosening, their recon is minimal. They're completely convinced we're on the verge of total collapse. Marina studied the global tactical display, watching as Nektari forces continued to advance into humanity's carefully laid trap. Each seeming retreat, each apparent failure, each panicked withdrawal was drawing them deeper into position. Send word to all command centers, she ordered. Prepare for Phase 3. Let's show these aliens why humans built our cities with steel and concrete instead of their precious crystals. As the second phase of humanity's grand deception drew to a close, the Nektari continued their advance, blind to the fact that every step they took was being guided by human planning. The trap was nearly ready. Soon, the aliens would learn that sometimes, the most dangerous prey is the one that appears most helpless. Vezare couldn't shake the growing sense of unease as she analyzed the latest battle data. Standing in the Nektari Forward Command Center, her translucent fingers traced patterns in the holographic display that no one else seemed to notice. The humans' apparent incompetence was too precise. Marshal Drakis, she ventured carefully, I've been studying the human retreat patterns across all major cities. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed with nervous energy as she spoke. The Grand Marshal turned from his tactical overview, his crystalline carapace catching the artificial light. More concerns, Officer Vezare. Their forces are in complete disarray. What could possibly trouble you about their failure? She projected a series of overlay maps, showing human troop movements across London, Tokyo, New York, and other major urban centers. Sir, their failures follow mathematical patterns. The timing of their weapons' malfunctions, the placement of their missed shots, even their retreat paths, they all conform to complex geometric sequences. Drakis studied the displays with growing irritation. You're seeing patterns where none exist. This is why you're still an analyst and not a field commander. His secondary hearts pulsed with dismissive amusement. Look at their latest defense attempt. The holographic display shifted to show a live feed from Sao Paulo, where human forces had just executed another catastrophically failed counterattack. Their missiles had curved away from Nektari positions at the last moment, destroying empty buildings instead. Does that look like calculated strategy to you? Drakis gestured at the chaos with one crystalline arm. They can't even maintain basic targeting systems. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, Colonel Marina Rodriguez watched the Nektari command communications with satisfaction. Their quantum encryption was impressive, but it was no match for the backdoors humanity had been quietly installing for months, disguised as system failures and software glitches. They're still not seeing it, Lieutenant Park reported, a hint of amazement in his voice. Even with the pattern literally in front of them, their superiority complex is blinding them completely. Marina nodded, studying the global tactical display. Nektari forces had pushed deep into every major urban center on Earth, exactly as planned. Their troops were spread through the concrete canyons of human cities, their command and control networks fully extended. Status of the power grid modifications, she asked. Complete in all target zones, Park confirmed. The Nektari think our power systems are failing randomly, but every malfunction has been precisely calibrated. The grid is now one giant electromagnetic pulse generator, just waiting for the signal. Ground Commander Rylix led his forces through the streets of Mumbai, his troops moving with the casual confidence of inevitable victory. The humans had retreated into the depths of their city, leaving behind only token resistance. His neural interfaces hummed with satisfaction as he reported another sector secured. But something was bothering him. The buildings around them showed signs of precise structural damage, yet none of it actually impeded their advance. It was as if the humans had deliberately weakened their own infrastructure in exactly the ways that wouldn't matter. Command, this is Ground Unit 7, he transmitted. Requesting additional analysis of human demolition patterns. Something seems His transmission was cut short as every power line in the city suddenly surged with energy. The carefully hidden electromagnetic pulse generators, disguised as failing infrastructure, activated in perfect synchronization. Across the globe, in every major city, the trap began to spring. The Nectari's advanced technology, their biomechanical augmentations, their neural interfaces, all of it was about to become worse than useless. Vezare's eyes widened as her displays erupted with warning signals. Marshal. Massive power fluctuations detected in all urban centers. Our forces are reporting. Her voice trailed off as the command center's systems began to flicker. The realization hit her too late, the humans hadn't been retreating in panic. They had been herding the Nectari into position, using their own arrogance as a weapon against them. In her Antarctic bunker, Colonel Marina Rodriguez gave the final order. Execute Phase 3. Let's show them what human incompetence really looks like. The trap was sprung. The true battle for Earth was about to begin, and the Nectari were about to learn that they had gravely underestimated their prey. Their technology, their pride, and their contempt had led them exactly where humanity wanted them, and now they would pay the price for their arrogance. The electromagnetic pulse that swept through Earth's cities wasn't like anything in recorded history. Each power grid, carefully modified over months of preparation, released its energy in precisely calculated waves. The Nectari's advanced technology, their greatest pride, became their undoing. Ground Commander Rylix screamed as his neural interfaces misfired, sending contradictory signals through his biomechanical systems. Around him, his troops collapsed in waves, their crystalline armor flickering with chaotic energy. The humans hadn't just created an EMP, they had tuned it specifically to the frequency of Nectari biotechnology. In the command center, Grand Marshal Drakis watched in horror as his holographic displays dissolved into static. Vezare's warnings echoed in his mind as the terrible truth became clear. All units, fall back, he roared into the emergency communications channel. It's a trap. The humans. But it was too late. From hidden bunkers and reinforced positions throughout every city, human forces emerged. Their weapons and equipment, deliberately kept primitive and hardened against electromagnetic interference, functioned perfectly. The true face of Earth's military revealed itself at last. Colonel Marina Rodriguez's voice echoed through all human command channels, Operation Fool's Gold, Phase 4. Show them what real warfare looks like. Armored units that had appeared to retreat in disarray now rolled forward with deadly precision. Aircraft that had seemed unable to fly straight now executed perfect attack formations. Every failed defense, every missed shot, every apparent malfunction had been carefully orchestrated to create killing zones throughout the urban centers. They played us, Vezare whispered, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with fear as she watched the tactical situation unravel. Every retreat led us deeper into their cities. Every failed attack forced us to bunch up in the streets. Every piece of destroyed infrastructure channeled us exactly where they wanted us. The Nectari troops, their advanced systems either offline or malfunctioning, found themselves fighting a very different kind of human army. These weren't the bumbling incompetents they'd mocked. These were warriors who had trained specifically for this moment, armed with weapons designed to function without complex targeting systems or neural interfaces. Lieutenant Park's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction as he reported to Colonel Rodriguez. Nectari forces are in complete disarray. Their command and control network is shattered. Individual units are trying to reorganize, but without their neural links, they can barely coordinate beyond visual range. Marina nodded, watching as human forces executed maneuvers they had practiced for months. And their orbital support? The same EMP technology we built into the power grids. We also put it in our failing orbital defense platforms. Their ships in low orbit are blind and deaf. The rest of their fleet can only watch. In New York, Sergeant Diana Walsh led her platoon through the concrete canyons of Manhattan. Her troops moved with practiced efficiency, their electromagnetic hardened gear functioning perfectly. The Nektari, their sophisticated weapons systems reduced to little more than expensive clubs, fell back in confusion. "Remember your training," she called out to her soldiers. They relied on their tech. We relied on skill. Now we show them the difference. The aliens learned too late that humans had been fighting with primitive weapons for thousands of years. Each city became a crucible where centuries of urban warfare experience met aliens who had never needed to fight without their technological advantages. Grand Marshal Drakis, his crystalline armor now little more than dead weight, watched his invasion force collapse. "How?" he demanded, mandibles clicking in fury. "How did we not see this coming?" Vezare, her own systems barely functioning, pulled up one last analysis on an emergency backup display. "They used our greatest strength against us, Marshal. Our absolute certainty in our superiority made us blind. Every failure we laughed at was deliberate. Every weakness we mocked was a lie." The Nektari forces, trapped in human cities with their technology crippled, faced a terrifying revelation: they had never been the hunters. From the very beginning, they had been the prey. The humans had simply waited, planned, and prepared for the perfect moment to spring their trap. Colonel Rodriguez opened a channel to all Earth forces. "Phase 4 is proceeding as planned. Remember, we don't just want to defeat them. We want to teach them a lesson they'll never forget. Show them exactly what humanity can do when we're underestimated." The battle for Earth had entered its final phase, and the Nektari were about to learn that sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that plays dead until the perfect moment to strike. The sun rose over Earth's cities to illuminate a very different battlefield than the one the Nektari had so confidently strode into just days before. Their mighty invasion force, once resplendent in crystalline armor and humming with biotechnology, now fought desperately for survival with failing systems and darkened carapaces. Grand Marshal Drakis stood in his command center, now lit only by emergency chemical lights, watching his empire's greatest military force crumble. The humans had not only anticipated their attack, they had orchestrated every moment of their apparent defeat to create this perfect trap. "Marshal," Vezare's voice was barely a whisper, her bioluminescent patterns dim with horror, were receiving reports from all major cities. "Without our neural interfaces and targeting systems, our troops are being systematically isolated and neutralized. The humans, they're not just fighting us. They're hunting us." In the streets of Chicago, Sergeant Diana Walsh's forces demonstrated exactly what Vezare meant. Her troops moved with practiced precision through the urban terrain, using tactics honed through centuries of human warfare. The Nektari, accustomed to relying on advanced targeting systems and neural-linked battle coordination, found themselves facing an enemy that had mastered the art of fighting with primitive weapons. "They never needed fancy tech," Walsh told her troops as they cornered another group of panicking aliens. "They just needed us to think they did." Colonel Marina Rodriguez watched the global tactical displays from her Antarctic command center, where Lieutenant Park continued to relay reports of Nektari forces falling to human counterattacks across the planet. "Their fleet is attempting to coordinate an orbital rescue," Park reported. "But with their ground-based command and control destroyed, and our orbital platforms still broadcasting targeted electromagnetic pulses, they can barely maintain formation, let alone attempt a rescue operation." Marina nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. "And the package for Grand Marshal Drakis?" "Ready for delivery, Colonel." In what remained of the Nektari forward command post, Drakis received a transmission on an ancient radio frequency, one so primitive that his forces had dismissed it as irrelevant background noise during their initial invasion. "Grand Marshal Drakis," Colonel Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speaker, clear and confident. "I believe it's time we had a proper introduction." "You." Drakis's mandibles clicked with fury. "You orchestrated all of this." "We orchestrated all of this," she corrected him. "Humanity, as a whole, recognized something your species had forgotten: true strength isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about understanding your enemy's weaknesses, including their pride." She continued, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's calculated victory. Every failed shot, every collapsed building, every retreating unit was precisely planned. We studied your previous conquests. We saw how your technological superiority had bred absolute confidence. So we gave you exactly what you expected to see, a primitive species fumbling with weapons we barely understood. Draki's secondary hearts pulsed with the bitter taste of realization. Why reveal this now? Why not simply destroy us? Because the lesson is more important than the victory, Marina replied. Your empire needs to understand, humanity doesn't need advanced biotechnology or neural interfaces to be dangerous. We've been fighting wars since before we discovered fire. Your mistake was assuming that because we didn't fight like you, we couldn't fight at all. Across Earth's cities, the remaining Nektari forces faced a choice: surrender to the humans they had so recently mocked, or continue a hopeless battle against an enemy that had outmaneuvered them at every turn. Vezare, her analytical mind finally seeing the full scope of human strategy, turned to her marshal. They never leaked their defense plans by accident. Every piece of intelligence we gathered was deliberately planted. They showed us exactly what we wanted to see, and we were too proud to question it. In the Antarctic bunker, Marina opened a channel to all Earth forces. The Nektari Empire came to our world believing they would find easy prey. Instead, they found that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our weapons, it's our ability to turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. Let this be a lesson to any other species watching: underestimate humanity at your own peril. As the last Nektari units surrendered and their fleet retreated in disarray, Earth cities began the process of rebuilding. The damaged infrastructure, the collapsed buildings, the scarred streets, all of it had been part of humanity's plan, and all of it could be repaired. But the message would echo across the galaxy: humans weren't just another primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were patient predators, capable of turning apparent weakness into devastating strength. The Nektari Empire had arrived expecting to find sheep; instead, they had walked into the den of wolves. And in the years to come, whenever another alien species contemplated invading Earth, they would remember the fate of the mighty Nektari fleet, and how human incompetence had been the most elaborate trap in military history.